Claire, Karen.
Mr. Speaker, well, in the spirit of the debate in the House tonight, can I congratulate Dr Shane Retty for having his member's bill drawn from the ballot, having a member's bill drawn as, as an uncommon thing for some of us in the House, or a rare thing. Some of us have more bills drawn than others, but it is the luck of the draw, and so it deserves to be taken seriously. Every piece of legislation, pretty much most, deserves to have debate about its importance, and in that spirit, and the more that I'm listening to the debate tonight, the more, as a member of the Commerce Select Committee, if this bill passes tonight, then I think there will be an interesting discussion, ideological discussion actually, philosophical discussion about principles. In my view, this is not a small change. This is actually, because it's a change to an interpretation in an act, it's actually quite a fundamental change. So there is actually important points of principle here. So while we note that this was actually drawn from a paper written by the New Zealand Initiative, which comes from a particular ideological point of view, and I'm making no comment about that, but that this, when you change an interpretation, a fundamental interpretation in a piece of legislation, it actually really matters. And my first point is that the description of this this Act, which is the Consumer Guarantees Act, and your amendment is actually not about a further protection for consumers. It's actually basically a protection for lenders, and so and as a result of that, it diminishes the protection for consumers, and so that is basically what we will be debating and discussing when it comes to the Select Committee and what the impact of that is. Another important point to make is that there are, and this is, I guess, around priorities, is about what is the priority when it comes to consumers and guarantees around consumers. And I commend the New Zealand First speaker for raising the responsible lending code, because there is much work yet to be done in that space, and if you are going to be talking about consumer guarantees, it would be much better if we were adopting the course proposed by my colleague Chris Farfoy in his private member's bill, which is the Credit Reforms Responsible Lending Bill, which strengthens the protections for consumers against loan sharks and the enormous interest rates that that loan sharks can impose, and the vulnerabilities that consumers end up in. And that is a fundamental change that would actually do a lot of good for in terms of protecting consumers. And there's been a lot of public outcry around that particular issue. It's really, I guess, apposite to note that around this issue, where has been the outcry? Where is the problem? And David Shearer, my colleague, raised that. It's been reinforced by others in the House. Who is actually saying that this is a problem? And where is the call for there to be a change, a fundamental change in interpretation of the Consumer Guarantees Act, which is ultimately and has been in place for some time? What is the point of changing the interpretation of that unless there is actually a problem that you're trying to solve? And not you, Mr. Speaker, but the member, Dr. Shane Retty. So, and I think that is what we will be trying to tease out if this bill comes to Select Committee, as to what is the problem here. And why do we have a Consumer Guarantees Act? It's a mechanism. There are other pieces of legislation that recourse can be got to, but there is important reasons as to why the Consumer Guarantees Act exists, why those protections are there for consumers as recourse, and fundamentally, I think this is an Orwellian piece of legislation, actually, because what you're proposing to do is the opposite of what the intent of this legislation actually is.